Hi everybody, what's the good word? Okay, hope you're enjoying your Labor Day weekend as we're coming to Monday here and it's coming to a close soon. But I wanted to do something that's kind of a labor for me, a labor of love, and it's not an easy thing. I've been meaning to do this for the longest time and it's impossible. It's something I never really got down to because as a fan of the Beatles, how are you supposed to rank your favorite to least favorite Beatles UK albums? I love all of them. Well, all of them with the exception of one, which is number 13. But that was the only easy one to really rank. The rest are difficult. But the problem with ranking for me is that, as I say, I love all the albums, and they're very consistent. I mean, when do you know a catalog like that that has almost every album is a gem, or at least has a lot of good songs on it, even if it's not the best? Nothing really here is a dog of an album. So what are you supposed to do? Also, the fact that the Beatles have so many different periods. The early period, the middle period, and then the later period. So if you prefer the early period, or you prefer the later period, or the middle, you know, what are you supposed to put for your favorite or least favorite? You know, it's tough. You got to give everything equal time. And a lot of factors went into the final decision I had. Let me just say, before I show these, that this is just my decision today, okay? Or recently, this week, you know, September, first week in September of the year 2016. And there's going to be a lot of opinions here, I'm sure, one way or another. I'm actually surprised at the end of the album I picked for number one for me, but I'll explain whatever I can as I go along about this. Number 13, we start with an album which I think is the easiest for most Beatle fans to choose as the least. Oh, it's Yellow Submarine. And before I continue, what I was going to say was, not all of these albums that I'm showing here are the UK albums, because in some cases, I actually, at the current time, don't have all of them in the UK, believe it or not. Looking for originals, I no longer have the box set that came out of the remasters. So I'm looking for the originals. So this, anyway, just pretend some of these are the UK covers, okay? All right, Yellow Submarine is easy to put last. I mean, simply because side one are Beatles songs and side two are all instrumentals from the movie. So by that alone, it's a no-brainer. You know, and also the fact that you have Yellow Submarine on here and All You Need Is Love, which were previously released. Never been a big fan of the song altogether now. It's one of my least favorite Beatles songs. I love George's Only a Northern Song. I love it. And I love Hey Bulldog. It's all too much. It used to be one of my worst Beatles songs. I used to pick it as the worst Beatles song, but these days I've come to appreciate it more, so I no longer put it as the worst. So anyway, this is number 13 for me. Number 12. Okay. Let It Be. Again, I'm showing the US version here. Let It Be. You know, there's not much you could say about it. I'm not going to go into as much detail about a lot of these as I did just now with Yellow Submarine. It's just a matter of preference, personal taste and ranking. I don't know. I've never had a problem, actually, with the Phil Spectoring of the songs. I actually think he made a good job of it, put the songs together in a way that's cohesive. The only thing I always regret about this is that the final product did not have Don't Let Me Down on it. But that's the album I pick at number 12. And I gotta say, the first four of these is not really that difficult to do. Number 11, Beatles for Sale. You know, yeah, I like Beatles for Sale, you know, but something's got to be number 11, and put them in order. This is the one that I picked for 11. What can I say about it? Good stuff on here, you know, but, you know, it just doesn't seem as great to me as some of the other ones I put ahead of it. You know, a lot of people pick on the cover songs here. I mean, the Beatles do great versions of cover songs. I mean, a lot of times they match, if not top, the original versions. It's another great thing they were able to do. So, now we go to number 10. We're down to the top 10 already. Number 10, I went for Please Please Me, their debut album. Classic debut. just doesn't rank higher than me. Again, a lot of cover songs. I don't really pick on the cover songs as much as other people do. Because as I say, the Beatles does such a great job of it. And wait till you see as we get closer to the top, you'll see what I mean by being a champion of the cover songs. But Please Please Me at number 10. Now for the 9th one. Now this was a difficult moment. I had two albums. The next two albums were tough. I mean, I didn't know which one I should rank at number 9 of these two, and which one at number 8. I think I had to rely on my own subjective opinion for this, because I think, well, I'll show you the album at number 9, Rubber Soul, which a lot of people are going to be shocked. Rubber Soul, all the way this low on the list. I actually was going to substitute the next album to come in this place and reverse it, but then I realized I really prefer the next album more than this one, personally, just a personal thing. So in that regard, I really was only gonna, if I would have ranked them the other way, I'd be ranking them that way, because Rubber Soul has a better reputation, so it's supposed to be ahead of this other album that I'm going to show. Rubber Soul, I gotta tell you, I love the cover. It might be my favorite Beatle cover. You know, people always say that Rubber Soul was so much of a change in direction for the Beatles. Now, I think Revolver was definitely a major change and shift for the Beatles. I never saw Rubber Soul as that much of a difference from Help, to tell you the truth. The only difference being, exception possibly, Norwegian Wood, because of the sitar. I mean, the sitar really makes this album stand out. That's the real only major change I can ever think of in this. I mean, good album, great album, but is it really that much of a change in direction? I don't know. Now, the next album, here's where I was going to reverse them. I put Help next. A lot of people would scoff, I'm sure, because they say, well, Help is definitely not as good an album as Rubber Soul, but personally, I enjoy the songs from this album as a whole, I guess, a little more than I do Rubber Soul, which is the reason I said I'm not going to go by what the popularity and the critics say. I'm going to go by what I feel is what the purpose of this list. So I went ahead with Help as number 8. You know, I can criticize all day why there's certain things that I can't get used to as an American fan who grew up with the U.S. albums. Still, like stuff like, you know, It's Only Love here, and I've Just Seen a Face. I like much better on the American Rubber Soul album, which, going back to Rubber Soul for a minute, I think that's the reason why I might not like the UK as much. I much prefer the US edition of Rubber Soul. People are split on that. You know, you can offer your comments. I know a lot of you will say, "Oh, you're crazy." Of course, the UK Rubber Soul is what the Beatles intended, and it's so much better. But you're going to find a lot of people that actually prefer the US, believe it or not, on that. So let the comments come, but we know it's going to be split. So anyway, we got Help there at number 8. Number 7, I went with Sgt Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Again, this is a US copy. I need a good UK copy. You know, there's a lot I want to say about this album, and what's really kind of funny about it today and weird is that I got all the things I have to say is in defense of this album. I never thought I'd have to defend this album, but we've gotten to a point now where it's in vogue to trash this album and say it's not that good and it's overrated and this and that and the other thing. I'm going to save all that if you can wait till June of 2017. But I got a lot to say in defense of this landmark masterpiece of an album. But it's never been one of my favorites, though. Hence why it's kind of low on here at number 7. So, Sgt Pepper, number 7. You know, I much prefer, well, I say much prefer, man, it's a strong word. I sort of prefer Magical Mystery Tour, which is my album that I put at number 6. If I'm going to listen to a 1967 Beatles album, for some reason I always reach for this ahead of Pepper. Capitol Records, say what you will about them, and I keep telling everybody I'm going to make a video. I keep putting it off. Eventually, where I'm defending the U.S. albums and talking about the U.S. albums compared to some of the British albums, and Capitol got it right 100% here. In fact, now, of course, this album is now the universal format, right? Even the UK have show this album now as in their catalog. This is the definitive way to have these songs, and I just enjoy it. I think it's a real trippy album. I don't know, just I enjoy listening to it more than Pepper. What can I tell you? And I know I've heard other people feel that way. Now we go to the top 5. Not easy to do. Not easy to do. Particularly the ranking. What I had to do here was mostly pick albums that I subjectively thought were my favorites, and then kind of give a little bit of credence to what critically, objectively, is supposed to be a better leap ahead for the Beatles. Something that deserves to be a little higher. So I'm constantly in conflict with that. What I personally prefer versus what the general feeling is. And I'm trying to compromise a little bit. Most of this it's supposed to be my own personal feeling. So anyway, without further ado, number 5, With the Beatles. This is an album that gets lambasted, and I just can't understand it. A lot of fans put this album down, and I think it's because of the cover versions again. A lot of people, whenever they pick Beatles albums, they always instinctively go for the albums with the cover versions as the least albums. I can understand that to a point. You want Lennon and McCartney and Harrison originals. But what I like about this album is, first of all, the iconic cover, the iconic image of the Beatles. This is the Beatles in 1963 at their rawest, their most primal, their hungriest, firing on all cylinders, ready to take over the world with Beatlemania. I mean, that's the best way I could put it. This is really, historically, the early Beatles coming out of the gate. I love this album. It was a time when this was my favorite album. I actually had this at number 1. If you ask me on another month or a week, I'll probably do that. What can I say about it? Even the cover versions here are phenomenal. I just love the way John sings Money. He belts that song out. You Really Got a Hold on Me. He does a great job with. Roll Over Beethoven. George really knocks that out of the ballpark. Paul is a great balladeer with Till There Was You, although it's my least favorite track on this album. And so on and so on. Please Mr. Postman. Oof, really gives the Marvelettes original a run for its money. Love George's Don't Bother Me, his first song that he wrote. It's really, really underrated, forgotten a lot. It's really a terrific song, Don't Bother Me. Anyway, With the Beatles starts out the top 5 today. Number 4. Okay, another shocker for a lot of people. What is this album doing so far down? Is it at number 1? It's Revolver. What can I say about it? Now, this is the change of direction album. Not Rubber Soul. To me, this is the real change, where the Beatles were taking on new ideas and new sounds, new effects. It's a great album. It's dominated by some of Paul McCartney's best ever stuff on here. I mean, just his best ever songs. I mean, For No One, Here, There, and Everywhere, Gotta Get You Into My Life. Good stuff. Eleanor Rigby, how can I forget that? A classic. And you get John getting really weirded out and acidy with stuff like She Said, and Dr. Robert, Tomorrow Never Knows, I'm Only Sleeping. This is an album version in the UK where it blows away the US version. Of course, there's no comparison. The US version completely is inferior to this. It's not even worth having, really. This one thing, we know all about Paul. Paul McCartney wants everybody to know he was really the avant-garde one. Don't forget, I'm the one that had the tape loops. For Tomorrow Never Knows, they were my tapes. I did Carnival of Light. That's a Carnival of Light is an unreleased Beatles song. They always say John was the one who was the avant-garde one. Well, I really, okay, Paul, revise things what you want. But anyway, it's true. Even though those things may be true, Lennon is really powerful on this album. Let's not forget about John just because he's been gone, nearly 36 years. So that's at number 4. Number 3, really tough for the next 3. Abbey Road. I was thinking that this, in a lot of ways, is the best Beatle album. I almost put this at number 1. Any of the next 3, I'll put at number 1. You know what's left if you're a big fan out there. The 3 albums remaining, just a matter of what order they're going to be in. I mean, this is really a great swan song for the Beatles. If this has to be their last album, they went out on a high note. Everybody, George Harrison actually dominating this album for the first time. His songs are something, and Here Comes the Sun, probably the best things on here. I think John is a little lacking on here. I don't think he's out as front as he used to be, but I like his stuff. And Paul with the "Oh Darling," boy, he really screams that out. One of Paul's best vocal performances ever. Ringo's "Octopus's Garden." I mean, Ringo only wrote 2 songs, but "Octopus's Garden" is his better of the 2 of the Beatles songs, I think. And you know, I love every song on here. Even Maxwell's "Silver Hammer," Paul at his silly best. But in this case, I mean, I know what Paul was trying to do, what he was going for with Maxwell's "Silver Hammer." And when you think about it, it's pretty ingenious, because it's kind of like a creepy song about a murderer. It sounds like you're taking a little stroll down the park, you know. So it's really kind of ingenious in a way. And the medley. What a way to go off with that medley. If the Beatles had to end, starting out with, you know, the medley which begins, I don't know where you'd want to start it. "You Never Give Me Your Money," and then "Sun King," and so on, going into the song, the end, where they all take a chance on the guitars, and "Golden Slumbers" a bit too. And in the end, "The love you take is equal to the love you make." What a great line to leave us with, which in a lot of ways kind of encapsulates the whole Beatles career. Anyway, that's number 3. Now, which ones? How are we going to do these 2 next? You know what's left. Okay, number 2, I went with "A Hard Day's Night." I prefer the early Beatles, believe it or not, even though you know by now what's number 1. It was surprised people. Surprised me. You know, great movie. Great songs. Me being a John fan, John kind of dominates this album. I like his songs on here, and again, early Beatles at their best. You know, no cover versions. You know, so if you want to go for that and say, well, you know, what's the early Beatles album where they don't do any covers and only the original material? It's this one. Great album. It epitomizes the early Beatles again. Flawless album as far as I'm concerned. Number 1, yes, that's right. The album called The Beatles, known as the White Album. I'm surprised even as I'm saying these words, because it's just how I feel lately. I mean, I played this album again recently. Every once in a while I go through the whole thing, and I gotta say, even though people would argue that this is the Beatles not really functioning as the Beatles, even though it's called The Beatles, it's a mess, a lot of people say. That's what I like about the album. First of all, it's a double album. The only time the Beatles did a double album. It's all over the place. There's so many different styles, so many different types of songs, and so many different types of music. A lot of fans, a lot of critics, even some of the Beatles themselves, if you watch the anthology, they said, and George Martin as well, the producer, said, you know, we should have made this a really good single album. We should have like tightened it up, throw out a lot of tracks. And then Paul McCartney, bless his soul, I love what Paul said. Paul has said things I've disagreed with over the years, and he said some things that I've really strongly agreed with. And one of them was definitely where he said, it's great, it's sold, it's the bloody Beatles White Album, shut up. And that's it for me in a nutshell. I don't want to hear anything about it. I agree with Paul on there. It should have been half the album. What makes it great is what it is. It's versatile. It's so all over the place. If you want albums where the Beatles just have tight, concise songs, listen to one of their other 12 albums. You got 12 other albums like that. That's what makes this so different. This is what makes it stand out. The stark white album cover, I really wouldn't really go for that. I think it would really be a terrible idea, if not for the fact that at the time that was what was so fun about it. Think about it. The album before this was Sgt Pepper with its great, trend-setting, artsy, fartsy cover. Really all over the place with a lot of color and a lot of activity and stuff. This is stark white, nothing. At the time, I could see why this was such a popular cover and why it's such a contrast from the album just before it. There's not enough I can say about the album. I mean, you know, I'm not going to go through all the tracks. Maybe some other time I'll rank them. I was just thinking, and I guess I put this at number 1 because I was playing it recently. I realized just how great this album is as a hodgepodge and collection of so many different sounds and so many different songs. A real work of art. In a lot of ways, it's their best. If I was going to recommend the Beatles album to somebody who'd never heard the Beatles before, they said, what would you say I should do to start with? It might be this album. This one or Revolver maybe. A little more accessible maybe to newbies, young people just starting out. Anyway, that's the best I could do for this. I hope it was good enough. I know there'll be a lot of comments. That's for today, you know, September of 2016, how I would rank the Beatles 13 UK albums. Cheers, everybody.